Hello and welcome to another episode of TED-IELTS. My name is David S. Wills, and today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the IELTS listening exam. Let's begin with some basic facts about the IELTS listening exam. Now, the IELTS listening test is the same whether you choose to do the academic or general IELTS exam. It is always going to be comprised of 4 parts, or 4 sections as they're known. And to do this exam, you do not need to have any specialist knowledge. This is a test of your English skill, and so even if there is some slightly complex subject like science, you would not be expected to be an expert in it. Another thing is that the IELTS listening exam is really quite predictable in terms of its form and in terms of the topics that will be covered. And we'll see that throughout today's video. In order to succeed at any exam, you need to know what you are being tested for. What is the reason for this exam? The IELTS listening exam is designed to test candidates' abilities to understand main ideas, to follow logical arguments, to find specific information such as numbers or addresses, and to recognize opinions or attitudes. The exam will take about 40 minutes. You will be listening to a recording for 30 minutes, and then you will have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. We can see here an example of what the answer sheet looks like. There are 40 questions, and you will have 40 spaces to write your answers. You must be very careful when transferring your answers over to this paper. During the 30 minutes of recording, you will be given some time to look at questions before listening. So not all of the 30 minutes actually involves active listening. There are 4 sections to the listening exam, and they begin with the easiest and end with the most difficult. So every section is a little harder than the one before it. Fortunately, we can predict the content a little bit. Sections 1 and 2 are going to be set in a social or common everyday setting. Sections 3 and 4 are going to be in an academic setting, such as a university campus. Once you know this, you can feel more confident going into the exam because you will expect to hear these things. Let's look in a little more detail. Section 1 will be a conversation between 2 people. It will take place in an everyday setting. It might be something like a phone call to a hotel or club or organization. You will often have to listen for quite simple information like phone numbers, basic details including notes. You can see an example set of questions here. You'll have an incomplete note paper and you'll have to fill in the answers. If you're expecting to do well on the IELTS listening, you really ought to be getting 100% of correct answers in section 1 because it becomes much more difficult after this. Section 2 is a monologue. Monologue means one person speaking. It will also take place in a general, everyday setting. But in this case, it will be one person giving information about something, such as a service or some arrangements. A common question type here is that you are given a table and you need to fill in the details. Section 3 is the first of the two academic questions, and this will also be a conversation. There may be two people, but there could be as many as 4 people. They will be most likely students, and they will be discussing something like an assignment or an upcoming or previous lecture. You need to keep track of what these people are saying and what they're implying in their words. As we can see from the example here, it is quite common to have a multiple choice question at this stage in the exam. Section 4 is the most difficult. Here you have a monologue. Usually it is a lecturer talking, but it could be something else. You will typically have to identify attitudes and opinions, and also to collect factual information from the lecture. Next, let's look at some of the common question types. We just saw a few examples there, but we'll explore some of the most common ones. The most common question type in the whole of the IELTS listening exam is the multiple choice question. So this could be answering a question by picking A, B, C, D, or finishing a sentence. Sometimes you have to pick one answer, or sometimes you have to pick 2 answers. It is important that you read the instructions carefully so that you know what you must do. Here is an example. If you want some more practice with your multiple choice questions, you can look to my website, www.TED-IELTS.com, and we have many TED Talks that I have written questions to, and often we do multiple choice questions. So you listen and try to pick the correct answer. Next is label a map, diagram, flowchart, etc. You have to listen to a verbal description and relate the different parts or areas to one another to fill in the gaps on a picture or chart, just like this. Then we have completing some kind of information, such as a form, a table, or a summary. So you will be presented with some information that is missing some words or phrases. You will listen and fill in the blanks. In this case, it is especially important to read the instructions. It may say write no more than 1 word, or 2 words and or a number, or 3 words. You must follow this very carefully. It is easy to make a mistake. Then we have the short answers section. In this case, the answers are typically more difficult than they are at other parts of the exam. Again, you will be given a number of words you can write, a limit to them, and you will have to choose those words from the text. Finally, we come to some helpful hints and tips for passing the IELTS listening exam. So the first one is to listen to different accents when you are preparing for the exam. A lot of students have a preference for British English or American English, but actually there are many native accents that may appear in the IELTS exam. So you might hear English or Scottish or Irish, American, New Zealand, South African, and these are all valid native English speaking accents, so you must be familiar with them, otherwise you may be a little unprepared when you hear them in the exam. Now in the IELTS listening, of course, people will be speaking standard English, but the accent will make a small difference. You can prepare yourself for this by listening to all different kinds of English during your practice. You should also work on your time management skills. You can do this by doing some practice tests in advance. This can help you with reading the questions and preparing to answer them, as well as checking your answers and transferring your answers to the answer sheet. A very important thing is to never leave a blank answer on your paper, especially for multiple choice. Always take a guess. You never know if you're going to be right or wrong. But if you leave it blank, then you will definitely not get a point. Even if your answer is completely wrong, you cannot be deducted points. You also need to think in terms of synonyms. This is something I always teach people for the IELTS reading exam because that's where it's most important. But it's very important in the listening exam as well. Oftentimes you'll see a question and there's a word in it that relates to a word in the listening passage, but it's not exactly the same. It is a synonym for that word, and this can help you find the correct answer. If you really can't find the correct answer, sometimes you can take a better guess by scoring out the incorrect answers. If you know for a fact the answer is not C, then it must be A or B, and you can guess with a 50-50 chance of being correct. Finally, you should listen to everything before choosing your answer. In the IELTS listening exam, they like to trick candidates by giving a false answer first. Often people will change their mind about something. They may say, let's meet at 5:15. Oh no, wait, I forgot. I have something to do then. Let's meet at 5:25. In this case, you may have already written down 5:15 and moved on to the next question without realizing that the answer was changed. Finally, one extra bonus tip. Be very, very careful of spelling, especially in true or false questions. I don't know why, but when I'm helping my students with practice exams, a significant proportion of them misspell the words true or false. They will often spell true as T-U-R-E. Now this makes your answer incorrect, even though the examiner knows what you mean. If you find yourself doing this, please just write T or F. That is perfectly acceptable. In addition, true is not the same as yes, and false is not the same as no. So make sure you follow the instructions very, very carefully. Okay guys, that's it for this week. I will see you again next weekend for another episode of TED-IELTS.